As a software engineer, I've spent my life dealing in absolutes, ones and zeros, true or false. There was a comforting certainty in that binary world. It's a certainty I thought I had in my marriage too. I had met my wife at a time when love was as simple as a shared glance across a crowded room. It was a time when the mere touch of her hand was enough to ignite the kind of spark that lights up a lifetime. We built a life together, filled with shared dreams, laughter and two beautiful daughters who mirrored the best of both of us. Our marriage was a haven, a safe harbor in the tumultuous sea of life together. We weathered the storms that came our way, always sure of our love for each other. I trusted her implicitly as she did me, or so I thought. She worked as a pharmaceutical rep, the job that required her to travel frequently. I remember watching her as she packed her bags, her face glowing with the thrill of new places and people. She kissed me goodbye, a promise in her eyes that no matter how far she went, she'd always return to me. I believed in that promise. I reveled in our hellos and goodbyes. Those sweet moments of reunion that made our love seem fresh and exciting. Our sex life never dwindled either. It remained passionate, intimate. A testament to our enduring bond. I had no reason to suspect that anything was amiss. I lived in blissful ignorance, confident in the love we shared, secure in the belief that I knew my wife better than anyone else in the world. But then the subtle shifts began, changes so slight. I almost dismissed them as figments of my imagination. That's when our story took a turn, plunging me into a reality I never saw coming. In the realm of code, anomalies are meant to be rectified. The bugs squashed before they become a full-blown system crash. I started noticing these anomalies in my wife's behavior. She was spending more time on her phone, her fingers dancing on the screen in a rhythm that didn't include me. She would abruptly end conversations or hide her phone. When I walked into the room, her laughter, a symphony I loved to hear, seemed hollow, and her smiles never quite reached her eyes. Her intimacy. Once the glue that held us together began to wane, the woman who would lay in my arms after a passionate night, whispering sweet nothings, seemed distant. Her mind elsewhere. The unsettling feeling of being an outsider in my own marriage crept in, a stranger in my own home. As a man of logic, I knew I needed tangible evidence before making any accusations. My mind was a whirlwind of doubts and questions. Could I be wrong? Could this all be a figment of my overactive imagination? Or was there another man? The mere thought was like a slap in the face. A painful blow that left me breathless. My intuition told me that something was awry. The woman I had loved for 26 years was drifting away from me, and I felt powerless to stop it. I knew I had to act to find the root cause of these anomalies. And so, with a heavy heart, I decided to hire a private investigator. Little did I know this decision was the beginning of an end I never envisioned. I hired a private investigator, a man with years of experience in uncovering the real truth hidden beneath layers of lies. I gave him all the information he needed, hoping against hope that I was mistaken, that my wife's odd behavior was just a phase. A result of work, stress or personal strain. Weeks passed, each day heavier than the one before. The waiting was excruciating, a silent torment. Each passing moment filled with dread and anticipation. And then one afternoon, I received a call that shattered my world. The investigator had news. His voice, usually calm and steady, had a tinge of regret as he revealed the truth. My wife, the woman I had devoted over 2 decades of my life to, had been having an affair for the past 4 years. The man she was seeing was from the city she frequently traveled to for work. The news hit me like a ton of bricks, that blow that knocked the wind out of me. My heart pounding in my chest as if trying to escape the pain. The world around me seemed to spin, the walls of my office closing in as the reality of my wife's betrayal sank in. The bitterness of the truth tasted like a poison I couldn't spit out, and just like that, the life I knew was no more, now armed with the bitter truth. I had to take action. I was a software engineer and man of logic and order, and it was in my nature to plan my next steps meticulously. Emotions were raging inside me, but I had to keep my cool. This wasn't just about me. It was also about our 2 daughters. First, I contacted an attorney, a third woman with a reputation for being ruthless in the courtroom. I relayed the whole story, the cheating, the secret affair, everything. She listened, her gaze sharp and assessing. As I poured out my heartache, she outlined the options for divorce, the division of property, the legal intricacies that I would soon have to navigate while my wife was away on one of her work trips. I moved out of our house. The place he had once called home was now just a stark reminder of broken trust and shattered dreams. I couldn't bear to stay there. Not with the ghost of our past haunting every room. My heart was heavy as I packed my belongings. Each object, each photograph was a painful reminder of happier times of a life that now seemed like a distant dream. But I had to be strong for myself and for our daughters. The future was uncertain. But one thing was clear, I was going to fight for what was rightfully mine. While my attorney worked tirelessly behind the scenes, the private investigator was still on the case, collecting more evidence to fortify my stand. I made sure to have the address of my soon-to-be ex-wife's corporate office. A piece of information that would prove crucial in the coming days. In the meantime, I moved into one of the houses I owned. It was a smaller place meant as an investment property, but it served as a temporary refuge in the storm that my life had become. I planned to sell this house. Once the dust had settled, the proceeds would help me rebuild my life, secure my future. I knew the divorce process would be long, and excruciating patience was my ally in time. My greatest weapon. I was going to serve her the divorce papers at her workplace, a place where she couldn't escape the reality of her actions. It was a calculated move, one that I hoped would give me the upper hand in the upcoming legal battle. In the midst of this nonsense, the thought of our daughters weighed heavily early on my mind. I decided to keep them in the dark until the divorce was final. They deserved to be spared from the ugliness of the situation. At least for a while their world was about to be turned upside down, and I wanted to prepare myself to guide them through it. The day of reckoning was upon us. 6 weeks after filing for divorce, my wife was served the papers at her workplace. I remember the phone call from my attorney, her voice steady and reassuring. "It's done. She's been served." It was a moment of cold satisfaction, but also a profound sadness. My marriage was officially crumbling. The divorce hearing was a whirlwind. My attorney presented the evidence from the private investigator revealing the extent of her infidelity. The judge, after carefully considering the evidence, denied her request for alimony in Georgia. If you can prove infidelity, the cheating party is not entitled to alimony. A law that was now working in my favor, even though she was allowed to stay in our house until it was sold. The ruling was largely in my favor. The other homes, which were in a trust owned by my brother, were saved from any claims she might make. I had taken steps to protect what was rightfully mine, and they had paid off. The fallout was beginning, and I was ready to face whatever came next. Despite the pain, I had a newfound sense of strength. This was my life, and I was going to fight for it with the divorce finalized. It was time to deliver the truth to our daughter. This was perhaps the most challenging part of the entire ordeal. I chose a quiet restaurant, a place where we shared many family dinners. Their innocent smiles and excited chatter quickly faded. As I revealed the truth, "I need to talk to you about something important." I began, my voice trembling slightly. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the emotional storm that was about to come. I spoke slowly and carefully, ensuring they understood the gravity of the situation. Their faces changed from confusion to shock and finally to tears. The raw emotion in their eyes was heart-wrenching. The betrayal they felt was palpable. In the weeks that followed, they distanced themselves from their mother. They were hurt and angry, and it was easier for them to place the blame solely on her. It was not the reaction I had hoped for, but it was a reaction that I understood all too well. This chapter in my life was closed, but it was far from the end of my story. I had to keep moving forward for my sake. And for my daughters. In the aftermath of the divorce, I found myself settling into a new rhythm of life. The once familiar home now felt like a distant memory. The house I moved into was one of my properties, a small but comfortable place that served as my sanctuary. During these trying times, the divorce had been messy and emotionally draining. But there were some small victories. When the judge ordered the sale of the house, I was relieved the equity would be split between us, offering me a financial cushion in this new phase of my life. When we sold the house, she got $60,000 in cash and I got around the same amount. Life became quieter, simpler, but also lonelier. I was back to living by myself, but it was better than living in a home filled with lies and deceit. It was a chance for me to heal, to regain my composure and strength, and to rebuild my life from the ground up. Meanwhile, news trickled in about my ex-wife through our daughters. I learned that she had moved into a small condominium. The city she chose was not a coincidence. It was the same city where her affair partner lived. The irony was not lost on me. It was about 4 months after the divorce. When I got a surprising piece of information, the private investigator I had hired earlier, who had since become somewhat of a confidant, reached out with some news. The man who had played a part in ruining my marriage was in jail. He was charged with domestic violence when he found out his wife was divorcing him and planned to, as the same goals, take him to the cleaners. He had lost control. He reacted violently, and now he was paying the price. While it didn't bring me joy to hear about someone else's misfortune, I couldn't help but feel a sense of poetic justice. His actions had caused pain and upheaval in my life, and now he was experiencing the consequences of his own decisions. It was a harsh reminder that choices have consequences, and those who choose to hurt others rarely escape unscathed. My daughters, they're two of the strongest women. I know their hearts were broken. Yet their support for me never wavered. They were in their late 20s, adults capable of making their own decisions. And this was the path they chose. I could see the pain in their eyes, the same pain that I felt their mother's actions had not only shattered our marriage but also their trust in her. It was a tough time for us, but it was also a time of coming together. We became closer, leaning on each other for support. In a strange turn of events, my ex-wife tried to take her own life after it was rumored that her AP was getting back together with his wife. My daughters were at the hospital. Apparently she had taken some pills. I really wanted to go to offer some support, but I decided not to. Her betrayal stunned me really bad, to where I just couldn't bring